All right, let's just get right into it. We're about to run what you might call a forensic audit on the very architecture of your social world. The main illusion we're tackling, it's this deep-seated belief that your thoughts, your values, even your strongest convictions are actually your own. And this is the core idea we're exploring. What you call opinions, well, what if they're just cached data? Pre-rendered responses from a massive collective simulation. I know, it's a jarring thought, but it's the foundation for everything we're about to unpack. And this idea leads us directly to the system itself, what we're going to call the social cage. This is that invisible web that kind of binds all of us, guiding our thoughts and actions, often without us even knowing it's there. We've got a name for this system, the Leviathan. Now, think of it like a giant, collective hive mind. It's a simulation that doesn't just nudge you in one direction or another. It actually preloads your responses to the world, and it does it so well that you believe they came from you. So how does something like this Leviathan hold on to its power? Well, it taps into one of our oldest, most primal fears, the terror of social rejection. I mean, to our evolutionary brain, being isolated isn't just about feeling lonely. It's basically a death sentence. We all want to belong, right? It's human nature. But this question, it just flips that whole idea on its head. What if every single time you conform, you're basically paying down a loan, and the currency you're using is your own unique potential? It's a powerful way to think about our social contracts. Okay, so if this cage is real, how is it actually built? Let's get into the nuts and bolts, the actual neurobiology that keeps you locked inside. Let's talk about your compliance hardware. First step, we've got mirror neurons. Now, these are the amazing brain cells that let us feel empathy and connect with each other. But, and this is a big but, they have a second job. They're also the main tool of our domestication, constantly and automatically syncing our behavior up with the herd around us. So if mirror neurons are the mechanism that helps you fit in, the Anterior Cingulate Cortex, or ACC for short, is the enforcer. This is your brain's internal alarm. It's the part that lights up when you step out of line, when you dare to stand for a truth that nobody else agrees with. And here's the really wild part. The ACC processes the pain of being rejected by your group in the exact same way it processes the pain of a broken bone. Just think about that for a second. Your own biology is set up to punish you with the feeling of real physical pain for daring to be an individual. It's no wonder most of us would rather stick with a comfortable lie. Now, we can even create a concept for this systemic pressure. It's called the social coupling coefficient. And look, don't worry about the math here. The main idea is that we can actually think about how deeply a person is stuck in the collective. It's a diagnostic tool. So let's just break this down into plain English. The coefficient is basically weighing the total pressure you feel from your social network against your own internal ability to handle stress. If you get a high value here, it simply means your own signal, your own thoughts, are being completely drowned out by the noise of the group. To put it as simply as possible, when this number gets too high, you've stopped being a source of original ideas. You've just become a relay, a repeater station for whatever signal the Leviathan is broadcasting. So, what's the actual, tangible cost of all this compliance? What do you really lose? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the price of the longing. The cost is a process called systemic dissolution. And what is that? It's the slow, methodical erasure of your true self. Because you got to understand, the Leviathan doesn't want you to be excellent. Excellence is a bug. It's a glitch in the system. No, it demands your average. That's what keeps the simulation stable. And how does it collect its tax? It uses these tools: guilt, shame, and of course, that constant dangling carrot, the promise of belonging. Every single time you nod along with something you know is false, you're chipping away a tiny piece of your own character. And here's a pretty sobering number for you: 45. By this age, according to the source material, an individual who hasn't done this kind of internal audit has pretty much become a carbon copy of their environment. You become a ghost in a machine that someone else built. See, you think you've traded your sovereignty for some kind of safety. But the system doesn't really offer safety. All it offers is a slower kind of death by dilution, using you as fuel to keep itself running. But look, it's not all doom and gloom. Not at all. There is a way out. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the Decoupling Protocol. This is a system for taking back your sovereignty. Now, I want to be really clear about this. The goal here isn't to become a hermit or cut yourself off from the world. No, this is about a strategic move, an ascension into true autonomy. It's about rebuilding your own internal fortress. So here are the 3 core steps. First up, a network audit. This means you got to systematically look at your connections and figure out which ones demand you to comply and which ones encourage you to be excellent. Second, social fasting. Intentionally disconnect from the digital hive mind, maybe for a day, maybe longer, just to create enough silence so you can actually hear your own logic again. And finally, you build the sovereign citadel, a personal value system that you define, one that needs absolutely zero approval from the outside world to stand firm. The transformation that happens here, it's profound. You go from being just a node, a single point in the network, to becoming an architect. You go from being controlled by the network to being visible within it, but controlled by absolutely no one. And this is the core principle of that sovereign citadel. When you no longer need the world to tell you who you are, your worth stops being some fluctuating market price that's set by everyone else. It becomes a constant, and it's determined by you. This is the end goal right here. It's about learning to exist within the system, to navigate it, but to no longer be defined by it, and certainly not controlled by it. So, we end with the same question that kicked off this whole audit. Now that you've seen the architecture of the cage and you've seen the protocol for escaping it, you have to ask yourself, are you a source of original thought, or are you simply a relay for the collective simulation? The choice now is yours. All right, today we're diving into something pretty radical. A protocol, a system really, designed to help you reclaim your own personal sovereignty from all those invisible forces that are constantly trying to shape how you think. Let's get right into it. So, we're going to start with a really stark premise. Think about it. Those things you call your opinions, your values, your deeply held convictions, are they actually yours? Or are they just, cached data, prepackaged responses you've downloaded from the collective simulation we all live in? That's the central question we're going to tear apart today. Okay, so that leads us directly to our first section, the social cage. We're about to run a full diagnostic on the invisible architecture that kind of corrals our behavior and puts a ceiling on our own personal freedom. And this simulation, it has a name, the Leviathan. Now, this isn't some person or a government. Think of it more as a societal operating system. A massive biological network that honestly doesn't care one bit about your individual truth. Its only goal, its only function, is to get compliance, to make sure the system stays stable and predictable. In its eyes, you're not a person, you're just fuel for the machine. So why is this system so darn effective? Well, it's because it hijacks our most primitive, deep-seated programming. Evolution has hardwired our brains to believe that what the tribe thinks is way more important for survival than what our own logic tells us. To that ancient part of your brain, being kicked out of the group is literally the same thing as a death sentence. And this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What if that powerful need we all have to belong isn't a source of comfort, but is actually a kind of trap? Frame it this way. What if it's a high-interest loan? Sure, you get the feeling of safety now, but the price you're paying, the currency, is your own unique, untapped potential. So how exactly is all this social pressure enforced? Well, that brings us to our next section, the compliance hardware. We're going to shift from the social theory to the biological reality, the actual neuroscience of submission. You see, deep inside your brain, you've got these things called mirror neurons. Their entire job is synchronization. On one hand, they're the basis for empathy. They let us connect with each other. But they're also the primary tool of our domestication, making sure we stay in line with the rest of the herd. And this is where it gets really wild. Check out the role of the ACC. When you dare to stray from the social norm, this part of your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. And it's the exact same area that processes physical pain. Let that sink in. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a broken bone and being rejected by the group. You are biologically punished for independent thought. We can even quantify this whole concept. Now, I know what you're thinking, that equation looks incredibly complex. But the idea behind it, the social coupling coefficient, is actually pretty simple. It's just a way to measure the total pressure your social network puts on your own thinking. If you have a high score, it means your individual thoughts have been almost completely drowned out. You're not thinking for yourself anymore, you've just become a relay for the network's signal. So, if that's the hardware, what's the actual cost of running this compliance program day in and day out? Well, that brings us to the tax of compliance. And honestly, it's a pretty grim diagnosis of how this entire system sustains itself. This really is the core directive. It's the whole game. The system is not interested in your unique gifts or what you can achieve at your absolute peak. It doesn't want your excellence. No, it demands your average, because the average is predictable, the average is manageable, and the average is zero threat to the system. But why? Well, because excellence, just by its very nature, is a wild card. It creates what the system sees as prediction errors, outcomes it can't easily calculate or control. And because of that, the network will use every tool it has, guilt, shame, the promise of belonging, to grind down your unique signal until you're completely indistinguishable from all the other noise. And this comparison just lays out the two paths perfectly. On one side, you have sovereignty. That's about excellence, having a unique signal, and having the guts to stand by a solitary truth. And on the other side, well, that's compliance. It's being average, becoming part of the collective noise, and finding comfort in a shared lie. You have to realize, every single time you agree with something you know is false, you're performing a little micro-liquidation of your own character. And make no mistake, this isn't just some abstract theory. It has a deadline. The source materials suggests that by age 45, if a person hasn't actively audited their own social wiring, they've become nothing more than a carbon copy of their environment. You've traded your sovereignty for a feeling of safety that isn't even real. The Leviathan doesn't offer safety, it just offers a slower death by dilution. Okay, but it does not have to end there. And that brings us to our final and most important section, the Decoupling Protocol. This is the actionable playbook for dismantling the cage and rebuilding your own internal fortress, your citadel. The protocol itself is a very deliberate three-step process. First, it starts with a ruthless network audit. You have to identify every single relationship that's based on you being compliant instead of you being excellent. If it's a parasitic drain, you liquidate it. Step 2 is social fasting. That means strategically disconnecting from the digital hive and the physical herd. In that silence, you'll finally start to hear your own logic. And lastly, you build your sovereign citadel, a personal value system so solid that it needs zero approval from the outside world. Now, it is absolutely vital to understand the purpose here. This is not about becoming a hermit or withdrawing from the world. This is strategic isolation. It's not a retreat into loneliness. It's a calculated, deliberate ascension into true personal autonomy. You're not running away from the world, you're rebuilding yourself so you can finally engage with it entirely on your own terms. So, what's the end game? The ultimate outcome of following this protocol is a fundamental shift in your role in the system. You'll find yourself in the Leviathan, but not of it. You stop being just a passive node, just relaying signals back and forth. You become the architect, someone who is capable of designing their own reality. And so we end right where we began, with a question, a final audit for you to perform on your own system. When you really look at your life, your thoughts, your connections, which one are you? Are you a node, or are you the architect?